I now take you down a little bit over history, because there is a controversy that is going on, but let's understand what truly happened as far as the IC814 hijacking is concerned. On the 24th of December 1999, an Indian Airlines flight number IC814 was supposed to carry 179 passengers and 11 crew members from Kathmandu in Nepal to New Delhi. What was supposed to be an hour-long flight turned into a 7-day ordeal when 5 Pakistani terrorists hijacked the plane shortly after it entered Indian airspace. IC814 carried 5 terrorists of the Harkat-ul-Mujahideen. They were Ibrahim Akhtar, Shahid Akhtar Saeed, Sunny Ahmed Qazi, Zahoor Mistri and Shakir. They were all Pakistani nationals who used code names like Chief, Doctor, Burger, Bhola and Shankar. The hijackers took away the food that had been served and separated the men from the women and children, blindfolding them and threatening them with explosives if they did not cooperate. The hijackers had Kalashnikov guns and knives. The hijackers wanted the plane to land in Pakistan. However, they were informed by the captain that there wasn't enough fuel to make the journey. The hijackers threatened killing passengers if their demands were not met. The Indian High Commission in Pakistan requested permission to land, but it was denied. The hijackers finally gave permission for the plane to land in Amritsar, India. As the plane landed in Amritsar, the hijackers brought between 6 to 10 passengers to the front and tied their hands behind their backs, and that's when the killings began. While nearly 17 passengers through the course of 6 days sustained serious injuries during this hijack, one man named Rupin Katyal was killed. Rupin Katyal was a newlywed returning from his honeymoon with his wife Rachna. He was brutally stabbed multiple times and killed on the first day of the hijack. His wife Rachna, who was at the back of the plane, had no idea that her husband had been killed and continued to hope for his survival, while Reuben slowly bled to death and became the lone casualty of this hijack. IC814 landed at multiple locations including Amritsar, Lahore and the UAE, where 27 passengers were released along with the dead body of Reuben Katyal. India's attempts of a rescue operation at the UAE was refused permission, and the hijacked plane once again took off, this time for Afghanistan, which became its final destination. IC814 landed at Kandahar airport on the 25th of December 1999. Kandahar back then was under the control of the Taliban. Armed members of the Taliban surrounded the hijacked aircraft, which raised doubts about the Taliban's intentions. The Taliban even surrounded the aircraft with tanks to prevent any Indian military operation. It was clear that the Pakistani hijackers were getting active support from the ISI in Kandahar, even though Pakistan refused initially to grant permission to the plane to land on its soil to maintain some distance from the hijackers. Pakistan's role in the hijacking became clear as the hijackers made 3 demands: release of 36 prisoners lodged in Indian jails, return of the body of HUM founder Sajjad Afghani, and $200 million in cash. Ultimately, the demand was reduced to the release of 3 deadly terrorists: Masood Azhar, founder of Jaish-e-Mohammed, Omar Sheikh and Mustaq Zargar. Azhar was back then arrested for terrorist activities in Jammu and Kashmir in 1994. Sheikh was arrested in connection with the 1994 kidnappings of foreigners perpetrated by HUA. Zargar, who had at least 3 dozen murder cases registered against him, was arrested on the 15th of May 1992 and imprisoned. On the 30th of December, the 3 terrorists were handed over to the hijackers, backed by Pakistan's ISI, in exchange for the Indian passengers and others, as well as crew members of IC814. The heroic crew members of IC814 flight included Captain Devi Sharan, a seasoned pilot, First Officer Rajendra Kumar, Flight Engineer Anil Kumar Jagia and Chief Flight Attendant Anil Sharma. Today, viewers, we're being joined by the voices who have lived and breathed the hijacking of IC814. Anil Sharma, Chief Flight Attendant of IC814. Captain Sharma, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. I want to, of course, begin by asking you, what really can you or do you remember about the hijacking? Can you tell us about before the hijacking? Did you find something suspicious or was it a routine flight?
No, it was a routine flight. We were delayed significantly when we left from Delhi. I think it should be known that excepting me, the rest of the crew, all three members of the cockpit crew, and 7 hostesses from Hyderabad base, they had started the day from Hyderabad. They had operated Hyderabad-Delhi flight, and they were supposed to do Kathmandu-Delhi, and then have a layover in Delhi. And the flight got delayed because there was a change of aircraft at Delhi for various operational reasons. So it was there was a lot of flurry of activity at Kathmandu airport, because the captain said that the sunset time was approaching, and if I recall correctly, there were no night operations that time. I mean, beyond that time. So a lot of rush. The guys who were cleaning were made to go through the motions very rapidly, and then the people started boarding, and we didn't find anything unusual in the passengers who had boarded, and everything seemed normal. People got seated pretty fast, and we shut the doors and we started flying. The unusual activity began 40 minutes after we had got airborne from Kathmandu.
Okay. Mr. Sharma, you say unusual activity began 40 minutes after. What really were the first moves of the hijackers? And I'm sure you also perhaps remember what exactly were you doing at that moment?
I was coming out of the cockpit, ma'am, and as I said, the cockpit crew, the cabin crew, they had started the day from Hyderabad. It had been a long day already. I was the only one who joined from Delhi. And I thought, let me offer them a cup of tea or coffee before we touched down in Delhi. So I was coming out of the cockpit and everything seemed very cheerful. The captains were in a good mood. The flight engineer was joking with me. And when I came out, I found a guy standing. It's a short corridor between the cockpit door and the galley, and there were 2 toilets on either side of that point where I was positioned when I saw this guy wearing a mask. He had spectacles and he had a pistol in his hand. So he said कि हम तैयारा take over कर रहे हैं, आप कोई होशियारी मत दिखाइएगा. So I tried. I felt that the game was already over as far as my role was concerned, in the sense that it was too late to inform the captain or do anything about the door, and because he virtually pushed me, and he also warned me कि हमारे आपसे कोई दुश्मनी नहीं है, आप भी कुछ चालाकी मत कीजिएगा, something like that. So I raised my hand to use the intercom, and then he said this. So after that, another guy appeared. This chap, the chief, went into the cockpit. Another guy appeared and he said, "Ab piche jaiye." So by the time I was leaving the J class and heading towards the economy class, the number of hijackers had grown to 3. One was in the cockpit, 2 were in the J class, and they started pushing people back. Hijack ho gaya, and sab piche jao. They started pulling the food trays from people, throwing them on the floor, and creating an atmosphere of horror. And when I went and sat in the first row of the economy class, I found 2 guys getting up from among the passengers. And soon they also had masks on their face. One of them was carrying a dagger. One of them was carrying a grenade and a revolver. So then, this is before we headed. They wanted to go to Lahore but
Yes.
The aircraft came back to Amritsar. This is what happened in the initial 1 hour or something after they took over the aircraft.
Mr. Sharma, the entire circumstances and situation really is unimaginable, but you're one of the people who've lived and survived now to tell the tale. But what really were the first thoughts then that came to your mind when you realized that the plane was hijacked?
Somehow one felt Indian Airlines aircraft, that airline, why should I say that? My airline enjoys the distinction of being the only airline which was targeted by hijackers 15 times before Kandahar. Some of them were farcical incidents and all that, but a hijack is a hijack till it gets resolved. And having known, and a lot of those hijacks took place from Delhi base, some from south like Bangalore, Cochin, and Trivandrum and places like that. And the first thought was that this will also get resolved in a few hours or maybe a couple of days at the most, because the longest hijack incident had hijack incident featuring Indian Airlines aircraft had lasted was about a maximum of a day and a half. So we were thinking that I was thinking that this could possibly get resolved in a few hours. There'll be somebody from the government, taking actions. We didn't know that they were a set of fiercely indoctrinated hijackers who had come with a mission to do or die. In the later days, they also said कि हम तो मरने को तैयार हैं, आप अपना सोचिए, and those sort of things. So one was still hopeful that things would settle down after some time. But as the day progressed, or shall I say the evening progressed, we realized that they were far more murderous and ferocious than any other group or gang or bunch of terrorists who had targeted the Indian Airlines aircraft, because within a few hours we knew that two people had been stabbed. One of them unfortunately lost his life. The other guy was also in pain. So this was the way the scene was unfolding, and slowly it started to dawn on us that things were much worse than what we initially imagined them to be.
Mr. Sharma, in such a situation where, of course, you just said you realize that this is not something that's going to pass very quickly, you feel that the passengers are, of course, your responsibility, but at the same time, you're human at the end of the day. You want to ensure your own safety as well. How did you really, how does one react? How did you go about this in your own mind?
See, initially, there's an incident, after they had taken control, they wanted a PA system to address the passengers. They wanted to warn them not to do anything and follow their orders. So this chap, Bhola, he tried to address them using a PA system which I had given him, but it didn't work. So he threw it against mid-bang against the aircraft wall. Then we gave him, to try to soften his anger, his control his rage. We gave him a PA system, a handheld microphone. And so basically the intention was subconscious or conscious, really, hard to say that, to not enrage them any further, to make them feel that we are not going to risk anything, risk any damage to the aircraft or to anybody's lives by confronting them verbally or physically. Now, this was the initial reaction, and then slowly the interaction began over the next few days. They started becoming a little more friendly. They would call me Sharma Saab, and they were also, they didn't know the girls' names, nor did they try to find out, but they were quite respectful, and that this is not a human angle that I'm putting to it. It's just that it was part of the training, because you don't want such people, who live by terror, don't want themselves to be distracted by any such thoughts or feelings. So this was the intention, and throughout this thing, we kept. The captain also called us and said, "Please cooperate with them." And I told him, I said, "We are already cooperating." Cooperating means you don't stand up or create conditions which would worsen the situation. That's what we did. That's what all the cabin crew members did.
Okay.
They knew the job. They knew how to deal with the situation like that. But some beyond that, things weren't under our control, right?
Mr. Sharma, we'd also like to understand, I mean, I just read out about some of the brutal attacks that took place. Ruben Katyal lost his life, and there was another major stabbing against Satnam Singh. What exactly do you remember when the hijackers started killing and stabbing some of the passengers? What really went, what sort of emotions then went through some of the crew members who became aware of those killings? Because like I said, some of the passengers at the back did not really know what was going on in the front.
You see, actually speaking, until we reached Dubai, that Al Minhad airport, I did not know that two people had been assaulted, because I was in the cabin and way to sit along with the rest of the passengers. My junior colleague Satish and hostess named Rajni, they had attended to the wounded passengers. That time, between Lahore and Dubai, he was still, alive. And Satnam Singh also had been admitted to he had been bandaged. He was in great pain. And but when we reached Al Manhad, suddenly Burger came, and he used to. I mean, the rest of the days on board, we would hear him speak in Urdu, Hindi, whatever you call it, Hindustani language. But that time he came and gave very crisp, commands. Get up, bring your friend. Something like that. He told me to bring Satish along. So we went to the J class. We found a person lying on the seat. So this guy from the other aisle, he said he's dead. Lift him up. So we tried to lift him up. We couldn't. Then another, I think the chief came out of the cockpit. He said, "Iska belt bada hoga." So we unfastened the belt. He and I, Satish and I, carried him to the step ladder fixed on the first door of the aircraft, and we laid his body. And so that's when, and then Satnam Singh by then had been offloaded along with the rest of the people, a fair, let's say, large number of ladies and children. But I think if I recall correctly, 27 of them. So, but I had seen Satnam Singh wounded, and obviously it was giving a very frightening thought to me or to anybody who had seen it, because there was 8 other passengers also in front of whom they had assaulted these 2 people, stabbed them, and I'm sure they live to this day very scared and frightened because they have seen death at such close quarters.
Absolutely. At the same time, Mr. Sharma, what really then happened once you landed in Afghanistan, Kandahar, which became the final destination? Was there anybody who entered the flight, or what exactly the sights that you started seeing? Because we remember that the hijackers had shut all the windows at that point in time so that nobody could look in. But photographs were later released which showed that the Taliban had surrounded. Did you have any inkling of what was happening outside, and what exactly were you made to do once the hijacked plane was in the presence of the Taliban?
I don't know about others, but for quite some time, I was not aware that we had landed in Afghanistan.
Okay.
The first indication came because we were not allowed to talk, and before we got to Kandahar, they had made all 8 of us cabin crew members, that is, on row numbers 15 CDF and 16 CDF. And we were not allowed to mingle, but then they got hold of some tea and probably some biscuits. And some of the cutlery had markings of Ariana Afghan. That's how one got the feeling. Then we looked at each other, by then one was beginning to establish some sort of a connection with the passengers seated on either side, and they said, "Hey, to Afghanistan ka wo hai." And that's when it dawned on us because the window blinds had been lowered. We were not allowed to lift them up, and we didn't have any access. The J class was empty. Occasionally, a couple of my uh, lady colleagues, Kalpana being one of them, and Kobita, they were allowed to come up to the forward galley, make some tea for the hijackers, and the captains and the commanders, the co-pilot and the flight agent are also been shifted to the economy class by then. So there were, of course, Afghani officials coming up and down, but later, I think a couple of days later, we got to know that the Emir, whatever you call it, of Afghanistan had paid a visit to Mullah Omar, but it wasn't confirmed. Nobody saw him, nobody, because we were told to sit quiet and not answer any questions raised by any Afghan official who came on board.
Okay, all right. Mr. Sharma, we'd also just like to understand, I mean, of course, there's a series that has now come out on Netflix called IC814, and there is some controversy around it. People have a problem with the fact that the code names of the hijackers, which are two Hindu names in it, have been used in the series. However, the makers have now said that they will rectify that error and they'll put out a disclaimer. There are also allegations that there have been attempts to humanize the terrorists. What is your take on all of this, sir?
Most certainly. I mean, no matter what one says or feels off the record, this is not something which can be included in, even if it's a drama or you say that it's a work of art. Frankly, I don't buy that kind of a nonsense. You can't say that is what work of art if art cannot. I mean, it means imposing one's own intent on other people, and then you say that if you don't like it, don't watch it or something. That's not the way to deal with. There is a certain boundary that every filmmaker must have. Because when you do this sort of a thing, when you take such liberty, it's going to affect some people. You may require a lot of money through people's viewership. You may say, "Oh, I succeeded in making such a hugely successful film or series." But the fact remains there's this element of conscience also which should be in play. There has to be an emotional component in your approach. You're not going to lose anything by being sensitive to this. For instance, in this series, they've shown, and I would love some of my colleagues on board that day, lady colleagues, I mean, the girls, to come up and say it doesn't, sound utterly convincing if I say that, nothing of this kind happened. I want them to vehemently deny that this is pure absurdity, to show that the person had a soft corner. What crap is this?
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not saying that there were moments when they tried to get very friendly. They would say कि अरे आप लोगों ने तो बड़ा काम कर दिया, ये बिल्कुल पहले जैसा कर दिया. When we cleaned up the aircraft, that is the galley and stuff like that, and or they would say कि like on the very last second last day when 30th go. They've given that we'll shoot all of you dead now in the morning, and then this guy came to me, Burger, and said कि Sharma साहब मैं lunch आपके साथ खाऊंगा. So I told him, I said, on one hand you're saying that we'll kill you, and on the other कहता मेरी बात तो मानिए, but I can't sort of say, oh my God, Burger was such a friendly man, so human.
Absolutely, yes.
That's a part of his mission, which he was assigned. There was nothing. I'm not going to meet burger, and I don't think I would ever like to. And
Yes.
so saying things that oh, she had a soft corner or this thing, these are very, very avoidable, unfortunate inclusions into the script. So I really don't know. And Anubhav Sinha is a very acclaimed writer. He'll say this guy is a loser if he's saying all. I mean, that's me saying all this. And who is he to comment? I'm such a brilliant filmmaker. So artistic, gifted artistically. So, but
Right. Okay. Mr. Sharma, before we let you go, sir, one last question. If there was one thing that you wanted to tell, are you still with me?
I would say that we must continue to believe that India is on a way to becoming a country which will be taken seriously by the rest of the people for economic reasons, for political reasons, for our general contribution to world peace. And, a lot of Indians have gone to foreign countries, contributed to and furthering their economy. They've contributed to making those countries more vibrant through culture. And this is also the time that we must believe that we are a strong nation. It doesn't, no country is perfect. Every country, every region will have problems. But the way we continue to believe or are being made to believe by certain Westerners that, oh, we can do nothing right. All that we can do is bungle. And this is the impression being given in the film that the bureaucrats were a bunch of idiots who didn't know how to handle it. This is not true. You have to work in those circles to know how difficult their job is. And they're all committed people. They've given their entire life to the jobs they're doing. People in the forces, people in the police, people in the bureaucratic circles, doctors, lawyers, all we have a growing population which is full of competent people. And then you have guys who want to raise questions about this thing. I am not a pessimist like them, unfortunately. I believe, and now that I live outside India for a major part of the year, I know how seriously people are taking India. And if Indians don't take themselves seriously, how will the world do that? So it's for youngsters to believe. It's not that everyone has that seen struggle. You, as a news person, must have gone through
Yes.
period of struggle. But there's life ahead. If you feel optimistic, so one day you could be in a position you would have never dreamt of. So this is my message to people that be proud Indians, be big-hearted Indians, be peace-loving Indians, be somewhat forgiving Indians, but don't allow people to plant these kind of reprehensible ideas that we have no future as a nation. Our politics is bad, no doubt about it, but it hasn't stopped people from doing well. There's signs of prosperity. It's
Yes.
going to take time. It's only been 70 years, and no country transforms itself in a matter of few years. So I
Right.
am very positive in that sense. I believe that the younger generation also should be equally optimistic and continue to do their best. You win some, you lose some, but eventually that's the only thing which will give us peace of mind and happiness.
Mr. Anil Sharma, thank you so much, sir, for joining us on NewsX to take us through what really happened back in 1999. With that, viewers, we step into a very short break. Welcome back, viewers. I'm being joined by Mr. Chandra Prakash Chhabra, a passenger of IC814 Next. Mr. Chhabra, thank you so much for speaking with NewsX, sir. I want to begin by asking you, what can you really tell us about the day you took this flight? Why exactly were you traveling?
उस दिन वो हमारा एक बिजनेस ट्रिप था
जी.
और हम लोग काठमांडू के लिए रवाना हुए थे.
Okay. तो जब आपने फ्लाइट बोर्ड करी तो कुछ सस्पिशियस लग रहा था जब आप व्हेन यू बोर्डेड द फ्लाइट?
वापसी में ऐसा कुछ नहीं लगा एयरपोर्ट पे। सब लोग अपने आप में मस्त थे। कुछ ऐसा नहीं लगा कि जो आपको क्या बता सकते।
पर मिस्टर छाबड़ा, आई जस्ट वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड, जब फ्लाइट हाईजैक हो गई, जिस मोमेंट पे हाईजैकर्स आ गए गन्स एंड नाइफ्स के साथ और आपको रियलाइज हो गया कि अब प्लेन हाईजैक्ड है, व्हाट रियली क्रॉस्ड योर माइंड सर? क्या इमोशंस थे उस वक्त?
हम लोग 24 तारीख को 4 बजे की फ़्लाइट थी और नियर अबाउट कोई 40-45 मिनट बाद सडनली 3-4 लोग आते हैं जिनके हाथ में पिस्टल और नाइफ थी और मंकी कैप्स उन्होंने पहन रखी थी और उन्होंने एकदम चीखना चिल्लाना चालू कर दिया और बहुत दहशत वाला माहौल उन्होंने क्रिएट कर दिया, जिसको देख के सब लोग शॉक्ड।
At the same time, Mr. Chabra, can you further describe the hijackers a bit for our viewers? Because of course these were already men who were sitting within the plane. What sort of weapons were they carrying with them?
फिलहाल जहाँ तक मुझे याद है उनके हाथ में पिस्टल और नाइफ और बहुत ज़्यादा चीख चिल्ला रहे थे ताकि दहशत का माहौल पैदा हो गया और सब लोग बहुत शॉक्ड थे और दहशत का पूरा माहौल बन गया।
एंड सर, जब फ्लाइट अपनी फाइनल डेस्टिनेशन कांदाहार में लैंड हुई, क्या आप लोगों को बताया गया कि अब आप अफगानिस्तान में हैं? ऐसा कुछ आपको इन्फॉर्मेशन दी गई? एग्जैक्टली क्या हुआ उस मोमेंट में?
क्योंकि मैंने आपको बताया 45 मिनट्स बाद प्लेन हाईजैक उन्होंने कर लिया था, जो कि उन्होंने खुद डिक्लेयर किया था कि हमने प्लेन हाईजैक कर लिया है और उसके लगभग 40-45 मिनट बाद उन्होंने इकोनॉमी क्लास से कुछ 15 से लेके 20 पर्सन्स को बिजनेस क्लास जाने के लिए बोला और उससे पहले उन्होंने उनके सबके हाथ खड़े करवा दिए थे कि जिस जिस तरफ हम इशारा करें वो बंदे खड़े हो जाएं और अपने हाथ ऊपर कर लें और हमारी इंस्ट्रक्शंस फॉलो करें। और शायद उसमें मेरा भी नंबर 4-5वां नंबर था जो मुझे खड़ा कर दिया गया और हम लोगों को बिजनेस क्लास में लेकर चले। शायद उन्होंने ये फील किया कि जो जितने स्ट्रॉन्ग बंदे हैं उनको वो उन लोगों ने उठा दिया।
Mr. Chabra, I'm sure it was a very, very difficult, of course, time and also to come out of the trauma of it. But if you were to now, many decades later, sir, tell young India about Kandahar hijack, one thing, what would that be, sir?
मेरा ख्याल ऐसे वक्त में आदमी को ज़्यादा पैनिक होने की बजाय हिम्मत और दिमाग से काम लेने की ज़रूरत है, जो कि मेरे साथ भी ऐसा हुआ।
Mr. Chabra, before we let you go, sir, there's also a Netflix series IC814 that has now come out, and there are lots of allegations against the makers of the series and the way that they've scripted the show, where they've tried to show a human side to the terrorists. Was that ever the case?
डेफिनेटली ये अच्छा लगा कि किसी ने ये प्रयास किया कि उस इंसिडेंट को दिखाने की कोशिश की, लेकिन जो बिजनेस क्लास में दहशत थी वो शब्दों में बयान नहीं की जाती।
All right, Mr. Chabra, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX. Next, viewers, we have another important voice, Mr. Kanchan Gupta, Senior Advisor to the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India, joins us on the broadcast. He was back then OSD to Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So we've just spoken to people who were physically present on the hijacked plane, but we now bring you a perspective of someone who was watching what was happening. Mr. Gupta, thank you so much for joining us. There is a lot of debate over the IC814 hijacking and the response of the Vajpayee government. Of course, hindsight is always 20/20, sir, but were 7 days truly required to secure the release of the passengers?
Yes, you have to understand the circumstances in which we were working. This was 1999. There were UN sanctions on the Taliban. No country had diplomatic relations with them. They were totally isolated. And so we did not have, via media, a third party to interlocute for us. By the time we were able to establish contact with the hijackers and the Taliban through a UN intermediary, some considerable amount of time had passed. But once we were able to establish contact and the negotiations began, and then they started placing their demands, and there were negotiations on those demands, and that's how it went, back and forth, back and forth. Otherwise, we would have ended up striking a very bad deal. So we had twofold purposes. One, to ensure that nothing happened to the passengers. There were, even after 27 people, or 26 plus one person who had been killed by the hijackers, even after they were deboarded
Yes.
In Dubai, we still had about close to 175 passengers and crew on board. And to ensure their safety, their security was the primary objective. And keeping that in mind, we had to also factor in that no agreement should be entered into that was impossible to keep. So all these things took time, and frankly, I think it was all wrapped up within 5 days. And we had some very brilliant senior officers on the ground in Kandahar who had been flown in. Mr. Vivek Karchu was one of them.
Yes.
We also had Mr. Dogal there. And that's how it happened. And I think we cracked it in less than 5 days. And then it was a question of logistics.
Mr. Gupta, what really then was the confusion and chaos that allowed the hijacked plane to take off from Amritsar? Because, I mean, the plane landed in India and was then taken to multiple destinations. But you've also written about there being some sort of bureaucratic confusion.
I don't understand, everybody keeps on talking about Amritsar. Does anybody even know the complexities of handling a hijack situation? Here is a plane with almost 200 people on board. It was jam-packed. It was a full flight. And the hijackers were desperate. In no mood to land in Amritsar and talk to the government. And if we had somehow managed to place some sort of a barrier in the path of the aircraft, I'm pretty sure the hijackers would have forced the pilot to start the plane and ram it into the barrier. There would have been a catastrophic disaster after that. We would have lost everybody. Now, I'm not bothered with whether the hijackers would have died in the process. I don't think they were particularly bothered either. Or whether, I don't think the ISI in Pakistan were particularly bothered that in such a situation their people would have died. But we were pretty bothered because we had Indian citizens on board. And saving their lives was the primary objective.
All right. Mr. Gupta, what further can you also tell us about the efforts of then Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaswant Singh?
Jaswant Singh ji played a very major role. He had an army background, so he understood tactics and strategy in a situation like this. And finally, he traveled to Kandahar to ensure that all the hijacked all the hostages were freed, and no harm was done to them at the last minute. So it was a very brave thing of him to do, and he did it.
Okay, Mr. Gupta, before we let you go, sir, one last question. Do you think India's stance and policy on terrorism and terrorist harboring nations has evolved to where it needs to be under the present government?
Yeah, that's why you don't have spectacular terrorist attack like we have seen during Pulwama, and before that in Mumbai when there was a carnage, and the UPA and the Congress say that the UPA government was a great failure because Bombay happened. And will the Congress then accept that yes, it was a great failure? So the issue is not success or failure. It is that any country, not only India, any country will continue to face national challenges. If it is not an act of terrorism, it will be an act of natural disaster. It will be something else. It will be an accident, a factory accident, like it happened in Bhopal. So why did Rahul Gandhi's daddy Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister when Bhopal happened? So shall we say that it was the grand failure of Rajiv Gandhi that Bhopal happened? So we should rise above party politics, from partisan politics, and take a united stand on situations that impact the entire nation, that impact national security, and we should deal with it from a non-party, non-political perspective.
Okay.
And that is the only point which needs to be repeated again and again, because you cannot reduce everything to politics, and you cannot reduce every event into a television serial like they have done with IC814.
Okay, all right, Mr. Kanchan Gupta, fair enough. Thank you so much, sir.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.